Howdy friends, welcome back. Today we're on location in rural part of Melbourne, Florida to do a water heater replacement. Now, you've seen me do these before, but today we're going to concentrate on a couple of the little tips and tricks when it comes to doing these successfully. So stick around and let's get started. All right, so there she is. Old A.O. Smith 55-gallon electric water heater that's leaking and it's out of warranty. So when you're going about doing these kind of replacements, always look at what you're working with. We're working with some copper here. Check your shutoff valves, all that other good stuff. Before you get started draining this water heater, always make sure to get the electric disconnected. Go to your fuse panel and use your multimeter so the power is completely off before any water leaves the tank. Yikes, scary business. Ugh. Those nuts didn't even unscrew. They just snapped. Ugh. And put our little terminals there and check, make sure we got no power on there. All right, now we know the power is disconnected and all that stuff. While we have the water pressure still on to the water heater and stuff, we're going to go ahead and we're going to try to blast out whatever corrosion and calcium and buildup is inside this tank to help it drain a little bit better. And we're going to allow that to try to clear up so we can get as much of that trash out of the bottom there. I do have a pump to drain these water heaters, but it died on me, so we're going to have to probably try to gravity drain this thing. Still got a lot of dirty water coming out of there. As soon as it clears up, we want to make sure that you always have a bucket. Put some fresh water in that bucket, and I'll tell you why before you start the install. All right, now that we've got some of that junk out of the line, let's go ahead and cut this valve off and open up our pressure relief and see if it still drains. Notice we have a shelf that's sitting above here. We're going to have to make a little bit of modifications to accommodate what we're doing. It started to slow down with the draining process. I have reason to believe that this pressure relief line is clogged somewhere in there. We're going to go ahead and we're going to cut that relief line. The water is back off to the heater, as you see, and maybe we can get it a little bit better drained. If not, we're going to have to cut it loose and roll it out the door full. All right, so we're back to draining, not real fast, but I went ahead and I cut the heater loose. Now it's got air to flow through that tank to allow it to start draining properly. Remember, those old pressure relief lines, when they put them in the house, it's probably clogged up with critters and nests and stuff. So we're not going to do that when we pipe it back in. But now, as you can see, once we cut it all loose, we have air flowing through that tank and it's draining. See how this was installed? Somebody looped this thing up and did all that other good stuff. We got to at least accommodate that to get it away from the shelving. Let me show you how I prefab these when it comes to working with copper on a water heater. I'm going to take a piece of 3/4 inch copper and I'm going to cut an 8-inch piece off there, prefab it, and solder a female adapter onto both ends. right, now we've got an 8-inch piece of copper with 2 female adapters soldered to each end. Teflon tape, pipe dope. I'm going to screw one of the ends in on one of the nipples all the way until it's tight. All right, so we're going to measure from the hub to the hub. That's 8 inches. We're wanting to cut that in half right at 4. See, we got our second piece. That's why we soldered both of those fittings on one piece of pipe. Now this is going to go over, so it's going to be uniformly the same height on the risers. We'll get that tightened down. Now remember, I told you that the pressure release line that was put in when the house is built is clogged. So we're not going to hook back up to that. Instead, we're going to be hooking up a CPVC male adapter to the pressure release valve and dumping it into the pan. This is a raised floor garage, so if it leaks, it's going to roll out the front door of the garage. Now, the draining process is quite slow on this heater. It's 55 gallons. So now that we have the heater cut out away from the wall, we may end up trying to hump this thing out, at least outside, so we can get the new heater in, because time's a ticking. Careful. I think it's full of water. Yeah, wow. 55 gallons times 8. That's almost 500 pounds going out the door. That's why I got a nice big helper with me. God. That bucket we filled up with water before we took the heater out, well, it not only acted as a way of cooling that copper off, but it's also going to act as a way to me to soak a rag to put around those nipples so we don't heat them up and ruin them. I went ahead and we capped off that old relief line. That's no good. It's all clogged up. I suppose I could try to blow it out or suck it out, but this is out in a garage. Technically speaking, this is how you really should do things. You can't run a relief line outside. Technically, your pan should sit and you should have that piped to an outside location, but there was no outside location even near. There's nothing but tons of stuff in this garage. So it is what it is. We're going to end up dumping the relief line down into the pan. All right, and because this has an elevated floor plan, if the heater does end up leaking or something, it's going to roll outside. That's how the floor is designed. All right, now that the new water heater is set into place, my helper is cleaning the top of those 4-inch pieces of copper that we soldered the female adapters onto. Let's get over to the expansion tank. Let's talk about that for a minute. All right, so you saw me in a video a while back on the proper way to calibrate an expansion tank to your water heater. And we already did that by pressurizing the tank to the same pressure of the house, which is 52 degrees. I've had a lot of people comment to me saying when they saw me install the expansion tank, asking me if it was upside down. Well, let's go right to the directions. See here, water line coming in. It shows you optional locations for your expansion tank. So by mounting them up the way I usually do, that is not upside down. It's an optional location. As long as it's somewhere in line, coming in from your cold before it goes into the tank itself. So there's your answer to a lot of you guys out there are saying, is that expansion tank mounted upside down? No, it's not. These are optional locations when it comes to making sure that the system is put together properly. All right, so we're getting ready to solder this all up. See how I had to raise that up just a little bit? We're still underneath the shelf. Still got our 4 inches there. Now we got for the expansion tank. This part of the lesson, when you are putting and applying flux to your copper, don't put a lot on it. I recommend just to put it on the end of the pipe where the fitting is going to go. You don't need to put flux inside the fitting. That is an overkill. Just a nice little bead just like that, and simply take and slide your fitting in place. Now we're ready to solder this up. Remember that rag we dipped in the water? Yeah, that's going to be used to wrap around the bottom ends so we don't apply any heat. We don't want to break that bead of plastic on there and pipe dope and stuff. We want that sealed off really, really good. And then we're going to lay a towel down across this entire area so when we're doing our soldering, stuff isn't dripping down on the top of here and making it look messy. Okay, before we start soldering, one little tip I want to add to everything is when you get to the point where you're heating up this part of a solder joint, which is upside down, make sure to hold on to a dry rag, heat that copper up, and as that flux starts coming out, you want to wipe that off before you apply solder. If not, it'll create what's called the candlestick effect. You'll have messy, runny looking solder. So just pay attention, and here we go. All right, now that the solder joint's been made and stuff, take that wet rag after things cool down a bit. Wipe off all that excess flux every single time. You don't want it sitting there rotting the pipe out. And now we got all things cleaned up and stuff. We're going to put the expansion tank on here in a second. But you want to check all your solder joints before you apply water. Good to have a little mirror. Go back behind these little guys and check and see if those solder joints look like they took all the way. That way there's no surprises once the water pressure starts going on. All right, expansion tank with the nipple side, Teflon tape, pipe dope. There you have it. We cleared that shelf that was sitting in there. All our solder joints look good. Expansion tank, that is a proper way. It's an optional way to put these in. It's not upside down. Read the instructions if you have any questions. And the pressure release down into the pan. I have instructed the homeowner to open up a faucet on the hot side to bleed air out inside. All right, time to flip the power on. There's no leaks. I got a timer up there, and my breaker that's in the panel will flip that on. Make sure it's heating, and then we'll close this thing out. Hey, that's all the time we got for this one. Thanks so much for hanging out, watching the video. A lot of the same stuff you see me do all the time, and some of you folks that have been following my YouTube channel for any time know that I do water heaters on a regular basis. But this video is directed towards a lot of you newcomers that have joined the channel, and I thank you for your support and stuff. I could share with you some of the tips and tricks for successful water heater replacement when it comes to working with copper. Not to mention, I wanted to put to rest a couple of little of the foibles that people have been telling me on my comments about, you know, thermal expansion tank being installed upside down, or the drain pan and all other stuff. It comes to certain times when you're doing these kind of jobs, you have to work with what you got. Everything here would pass code here in Florida. Got any questions, leave them down below, and don't forget to keep plumbing.